And thank you very much for joining us once again here on the Manifesto Tracker. Tonight we are discussing one of those sectors that affects a lot of people indeed in the country that largely has been agrarian but has been changing in its dynamics over the years. And as you can see, I'm joined on the set to help me with the analysis with King Carl Duho with the Imani Ghana. He's a consultant, research consultant with Imani. He's been here before. And Carl, thank you very much for joining us again. Let's quickly go into it because there's a lot to plow through. Also because the agric sector is a bulky area and affects so many lives. We're going to look at the agric sector debate. After the analysis, we'll be joined by the Deputy Agric Minister who has agreed to join us. And we'll also be speaking with the NDC Manifesto spokesperson on the agric sector. It promises to be revealing again. And as we always say on Manifesto Tracker, by the time we end at 10:30, we're hoping that we would have broken down the issues and you have heard the two sides articulate their manifesto issues on the agric sector. So it helps you decide where to pitch your tent. Simple thing they'll be doing is selling their manifestos to you, but with us interrogating it a bit more. Let's go into the analysis very quickly. Now, these are a few very important issues that we need to quickly observe. And Carl, this is important. What we want to do is to always establish the basis for analyzing the manifestos, as in what is the state of the agric sector currently, right? And Carl, we see this as the economic aggregates. What are we looking at here? This is GDP at constant 2013 prices billion. What does this mean in 2019 when we say 165 billion? Is that what the agric sector is contributing to the economy? Okay, so
Evans, for us to start, we have to look at what value we are deriving as a country, and we want to look at the GDP in total. So this data here tries to capture the total GDP of the country. And we see that in 2013, the total GDP was about 124 billion Ghana cedi, and that has increased to 165 billion Ghana cedi in 2019.
This is part of the rebasing that was done.
Yes.
That shot us up to there. And the GDP growth rate, as you can see, has been increasing consistently up until 6.5. COVID means that it had been projected to grow at 0.9. But the finance minister told us today that that has been revised to grow at 1.6 or 1.9% going forward. So this is what we know globally as the GDP is concerned. Now let's narrow down to agric because it's important. So the agricultural sector is now contributing, what, 60 billion?
Yeah, so for 2019, it's 60.48 billion Ghana cedis.
To the economy?
To the economy.
And it started off at 25 billion?
Yes, so there has been an increase over the time period.
Okay, so that policy-wise and everything else is what we've seen the growth. And again, remember that we're going to be analyzing two-party manifestos, NDC and MPP. 2013 to 2016 is important. 2013 to 2016 is John Mahama.
Yeah.
2017 to 2019 is Nana Addo Akufo-Addo. And if you look at the difference in terms of the growth, from 2013 to 2016, there is an exponential growth of what?
We'll pick that up in the next.
Yes, I mean, but you see, in share increase terms, in terms of the value to the economy,
about 20 billion.
About 20 billion Ghana cedis was added on in terms of the investments and what it began to contribute under John Mahama. If you look at the Nana Addo, 50 to 60 billion, that is 10 billion. But of course, we're waiting 2019, 2020.
So from 2016 to it's another about 60 billion.
60 billion.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, of course, if you look at that, if you
about 20 billion.
If you look at that,
yes.
So that, and you see crops. And what we're going to do when we sit down to analyze the manifestos is that we're going to look at what they're proposing in these agric generally, but in crops, in cocoa, livestock, forestry, fishing. This is what agric really is, and you see all that various sectors tell you. Let's look at quickly at what the next slide tell us in terms of the growth rate, and this is important. And for me, when you're analyzing manifestos or manifesto tracker, you always have to pay attention to the track record. Track record is important in scrutinizing both parties. And in the agric sector, I want to look at what have they done to increase the agric growth rate, correct?
Yeah.
And this is the statistics.
Yes. So you see that in 2014, the growth rate was 0.6%.
This is extremely poor.
Yeah, 0.9%.
Possibly the lowest we've had
One of the lowest. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but that has increased from, for the NPP's time, 6.1 in 2017, 4.8, 4.6. Looks a bit better.
Yeah.
There are dynamics to that, but we see that the 4 main areas that contribute to this growth is crops, livestock, forestry and logging, and fishing. And we see that majority of it comes from the crops, and cocoa is a key factor.
Yeah.
There are others like cashew that are also growing.
That is important. And so you begin to see how these individual sectors are performing under the Agric sector. And if you look at it in the 3-year period, I mean, crops, for example, 7.2, that's very high in 2017. Yeah. It drops and it's dropped again. Yes. So there's this, the slope is downwards in terms of the growth when it comes to crops. The Deputy Agric Minister is here. He will explain to us why that is happening. Is it because of failed policies, interventions? We'll interrogate that. And then we'll look at the NDC's own track record. At crops 2.8, a high of 2.8 in 2014, but they too saw a consistent decline. Apart from 2016 that came up a bit, they were in 2%, 1.2%, the highest it went there. Again, we'll interrogate that. That goes into track record. We'll come to that very shortly. Now, let's go into this beautiful graph here that tells you how Agric is faring as against services and industry.
Yeah. So, well, there are three sectors that contribute to the whole economy, and that's the agriculture, the services, the industry. We see that the services industry contributes significantly to employment.
So this is this part you're talking about.
Exactly.
Here.
And that's followed by Agric and followed by industry. We want to see the same with regards to the GDP contribution directly. But we see
Agric is contributing.
The second...
That is 33%.
Yes.
Employment.
Yes.
33% of employment in the economy. Is credited to Agric.
Yes.
Industry services is employing a vast majority of 48%, and then industry is doing 19%. Yeah. But you say when you do the reverse and look at this contribution to GDP, it's not the same. It doesn't follow.
The value addition, agriculture is not doing so much.
In second place, I think.
Exactly. That's the third. In
that's the third. Yes. So that's
here, the second case, over there, the third case, the last. So you see that there may be a lot of people that are being employed in the agri sector, but the value per individual, per capita is not that high.
That's an interesting point to note here. Now, we also want to quickly look at this just gives you a sense of the individual parts under the Agric, as in crops, livestock, how they also contribute to the GDP. I want to quickly go to this very important slide. Explain this to me. These are the sector challenges.
Exactly.
And the reason why this is important is that every manifesto, we believe, together with the money, must address these challenges. Exactly. If they are not addressing these challenges, then they're probably possibly missing the point.
Exactly.
Let's go through
they have to. The first one is the financial support. The capital is needed for these farmers to be able to implement whatever idea they have, and then try to add value to the crops that they have, or the various fish, whether it's fishing or whichever area, subsector. Then the transportation. You may have the goods in the villages, but how to transport it, the roads are not good. The roads have to also be.
You remind me of the cocoa roads. We'll talk about that. It's very controversial. Exactly. The NDC has said a lot about this, challenging the current government to publish a report on an audit that was done. The government says, well, we're not publishing it yet, but we know that the outcome says some, value for money questions have been raised by the John Mahama government's, contracts there. We'll look at that, but that is important. Yes. It's the reason why we have the cocoa roads, to address this particular challenge.
So apart from that, to storage. So if you have the goods, how do you store them? How do you move them? Then inadequate agriculture extension services. Sometimes the farmers are not so skilled. They need some support, and then there's a need for provision of that support. Then low mechanization, poor adoption of technology. So there's a need for this technology. This time we are in a technology age. It's not only the digitization of some of these things. All of these have to also come to the farming. Then also the land tenure system that we have. There are a lot of problems. Then the lack of information. There's the need for us to use big data to analyze agricultural issues, but we don't have that. And there's a need for us as a nation to start looking into
Key question. So which of the two parties' manifestos begin to address these points? Let's go into the specifics of what the parties are now promising. Before we do that, we do something on Manifesto Tracker every time to do the numbers. So NDC has a huge number of promises. or policy proposals for 2021-2024 if they win elections when it comes to the Agric sector compared to the NPP. NDC is promising as many as 40 key proposals and policy interventions that they are putting in their manifesto. That's against the MPP's 10.
Yeah, so, well, that's a narrative of an opposition party. They try to sell the issues out while the incumbents has things already in progress and try to raise them up.
Yeah, so consolidating what you've already been doing. I mean, NDC, they want to win power, and so they want to address all the key things that they believe that is important to the people.
Exactly. So that's why whatever in the whole process of speaking for the NDC side, they should be able to be matching whatever they have promised to what is already in existence and try to tell us, the Ghanaians, how is their alternative better for.
Okay, and then the quantifiable. You at the money should to single out for the NDC, in spite of the volume of interventions they have in their manifesto, only 2 of the proposals can be quantified.
Yeah. So what we do is that we try to look at the various promises and try to see whether we can do a clear analysis, quantitative analysis, whether an indicator based, and try to see maybe if they promise, we'll try to give free healthcare to 30% farmers.
Yeah.
That
can drill it down to a certain quantifiable.
Then there are certain number of them. So for the MPP, there's
0.
It's not.
So all the promises are not quantifiable.
And they have it in a more broad framework, which is broad. But
I dare say, so there's something I've noticed about the MPP. They were the party that were very heavy on the number-based, quantifiable interventions in 2016. So you remember one district, one factory. You remember one constituency, $1 million. One village, one dam. Very quantifiable stuff. Yes. But they have learned their lesson, because when you do that, it's very easy to track you, to monitor you, to tell you if you're failing or not, because it's quantified, right? So having been in power for 4 years, they think, well, let's be a bit more vague in what we promise. It's going to be more difficult to track them. Yeah. And we are seeing that in the way they are couching their manifesto promises. I've done this for 2 months now, and I noticed that I'm not surprised that quantifiability of their promises on the agric sector is 0.
Yes.
So I mean, the deputy minister is here. You tell us why that is.
But it's also raised an issue for us to start questioning them. And we should do that today for them to provide
we will do. Semi-quantifiable, again, NDC has 23 of them. That's semi-quantifiable.
So some of them you can do some extrapolation and then try to
put some numbers and analysis to it. Okay, so let's go into the specifics. So if we look at cocoa, and we are going to isolate it, we talked about crops, right? And cocoa is a big one because of its contribution to us generally, which we've illustrated already. NDC is big on cocoa, right? And so they're restoring the distribution of free fertilizer and chemicals to cocoa farmers. This is a big intervention for John Mahama when he was in government.
Yeah, that's
the NDC took it out and replaced it with subsidies.
Exactly.
Right? MPP replaced with subsidies. John Mahama says he want to bring it back. The key question is it what we need?
Yeah, so Imani did a research 2019 that tried to look at the whole cocoa sector. I'm saying this because I see the NDC's manifesto for the Agric almost as a cocoa manifesto. Because a lot of
the interesting one. It's a cocoa manifesto
on the cocoa sector. So we saw that a lot of the distribution was ineffective, and there were smugglings, and there were stakeholders that were raising a lot of issues. So we have started questioning some of these things and how the government would do it and not have the same problem again.
That you've raised very important. Remember, we should not forget that MPPs, one of the biggest prosecutions that they've pursued is against the former Cocoa Board chief executive. And a lot of the accusations that the Attorney General is pursuing has to do with how they handled the free fertilizer intervention. Because the current government believe there's some corruption there. That case is still one of those that is still being pursued. And so the key questions you've raised there. But they also say they want to provide free primary health care for all cocoa farmers and also exempt all cocoa farmers from any child premium payments for secondary and tertiary care. Now I see why you say it's a cocoa manifesto.
Yeah, so there are lots. Even there's one on cocoa clinics where they are saying they will.
The next slide will show us.
So it's still odd. But the point is that the cocoa sector, when you look at the Cocoa Board balance sheets and their various sharing structure, they have the sharing structure. You see that some of these things are deducted from the FOB price that is received from the international market. So sometimes it's not some free thing per se, it's the farmers' money, but they send it back to them. Well, it's because the cocoa sector is huge, about 800,000 farmers, and indirect impact on the
a lot of lives.
So a lot of lives,
yeah.
and a lot of voters, and then
yeah.
the impact is significant.
I mean, so that's where the thinking is, right? I mean, if you look at the multiplier effect, one cocoa farmer has a family, and then they of course they spin off businesses that benefit from there. You're talking about millions of potential voters, and so if you focus there, you might win the election. The MEP is talking about diversification of oriented large agricultural enterprises in cocoa, palm oil, cereal, rice, horticulture, poultry, and meat for regional markets. They want to diversify, export more variety.
Yeah, so I think we lose a lot with regards to the export instability when we are depending on only one crop or one of our export items. So we need to diversify, and it's a key thing. But how do we do it? How do we add the value? Is still a question. Yeah. It's a big thing, but they have to go deep.
I mean, it comes back to the point you make about the quantifiability and specificity of the promise. It's pretty vague. The question is about how. The Deputy Minister will tell us. Again, cocoa healthcare, biometric database of all cocoa farmers and are made available to cocoa clinics, which is the point you made. Equip existing cocoa clinics. Establishment of a pension scheme for cocoa farmers. The point about this particular promise is that it was there, the NDC first introduced this promise in their 2012 manifesto. They won the elections with that manifesto. They had 4 years to implement this promise, did not implement it. It's back in the 2020 manifesto. The question that we must ask the NDC is, if you did it promise in 2012, you had 4 years to do it, you didn't do it. Why should we believe that you will do it this time?
That's the issue. And I saw some news articles that are indicating that the current cocoa board management is indicating they have this inception. But the point is that you can have it in the act or in the framework, but implementation is always the sustainability of it. The same with regards to the biometric. There are a lot of things that are being done. So we want to see the NDC and the NPP compare. NPP mentioned to us what you are doing currently with regard to some of these things. The NDC, how is your alternative better than what?
Yeah, I mean, cocoa farmers are watching very closely. And no surprise that the current government has increased the price for farmers.
They have done that consistently,
with the highest one being the 660, that the Ghana cedi that they're giving to the farmers. We'll come to that. NDC, again, still on cocoa, a consistent annual incremental cocoa price to make cocoa farming more attractive. Consistently
so which is what the NPP is doing. Tell us how yours will be different from what they are already doing.
Okay, but then we have to look at their track record. Did they consistently do this when they had the 4 years between 2013 and 2016? I have the data. We'll put it to the two gentlemen.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Imani did some work on that, and they have not done that.
They were not. NDC wasn't consistent with the increase in prices, but MPP has been.
They have been, and there were times where they have to inject an amount of money to reduce the cost of cocoa board, which means kind of an off-balance sheet item to reduce the cost. So sometimes it's at the cost of the taxpayers' money as well.
Okay, I mean, very interesting point that we used to interrogate very shortly. Still on health, eliminate worst forms of child labor, which is important to you on this matter.
So the child labor issue is so important. Well, as a country, we want to put ourselves out in the international domain nicely. But if the problem still persists, it's a life. One life is so important. A child's life is so important, and there's a need for the focus there. Currently, there are some things that are done around here with some partnership with some of the institutions, but there's more to be done. But what are the specifics to some of these is the issue.
Cocoa to provide social amenities, electricity, water to farmers, etc. Also, and then here's a big cocoa roads debate. Revive and broaden the scope of cocoa roads project. This government says we haven't scrapped the cocoa roads project. We have begun. We just put it in a hole so we do value for money. We're done. We finished it. The roads are ongoing. The NDC said, you scrapped it. I mean, and they've been campaigning with it on the ground. This is a huge contentious area.
Well, as I mentioned again, I'll refer to the Imani report again. Yeah. What we did then was to look deep into cocoa board's balance sheet, and we saw as at then they expense the cocoa roads, a huge expenditure. It cuts and then they make loss. What they do currently is that these cocoa roads are assets on the balance sheet of cocoa board currently. So that's a different over there, and that's
how the NDC handled it to what the MPP handled. Which one? Okay, well, I mean,
that's an accounting dynamic. So the point is that the cocoa roads are there. Where's the report? Why can't we see the content? And if MPP and NDC is promising this, will they come up again, pay the other people as they are saying they will be paying the contractors? what are the dynamics? So we have to look at some of these things. Sometimes contentions between two bulls or two dogs may have effects on the ground.
Absolutely.
And sometimes the contentions between the NDC and NPP may have effects on the whole.
We'll interrogate this cocoa roast matter because it's important to a lot of farmers across the country when they're talking about the agric sector. And this is farm practices effectively tackle the 4 armyworms, which we know became a big issue a few months, in fact, this last 2 years. Provide free fertilizer and other agro-business. We've touched on this area, but I'm interested in the MPP's promise here to support for farmers through supply of inputs, farm extension services, disease control, warehousing, post-harvest logistics, and link with industry, mainly 1D, 1F.
Yeah, so this is almost like a book title. It's very big.
Everything is.
It has a lot. But the dynamics, what are the specifics? Because these are almost the whole agriculture value chain, from the extension service, disease control,
all
warehousing,
to industry.
So, but what are the dynamics, the specifics? And
it's just too vague. Exactly. And my point, I look at the manifesto for the MPP, I'm like, but you've done planting for food and jobs. It's so specific. You had targets.
Exactly.
So when you're doing 2021, 2024, I thought that will sort of play out in terms of redefining it, in terms of the targets, in terms of what you want to do, how do you want to enhance it, to be more specific. But they've been pretty vague in what they are promising. We'll try and get some clarity on that when we talk to the Deputy Minister. Now, I introduced this because, this, by the way, is the production, cocoa production in metric tons over the years. Because whatever, all the inputs and policy interventions, we must also get to a point where we do the outcomes.
Exactly.
Outcomes. This is one of the outcomes. If you do all these fantastic things in cocoa and whatever, we must see, is it linked to productivity? And this is sort of a track record of a graph that tells you the production of cocoa metric tons over the years. So if you look at let's do, because we're doing the two parties, 2016-2017 crop season was the highest on this graph, right? On this graph. With 969,000 metric tons of cocoa produced that year. When Nanado took over, it dropped to, as the graph shows, 905,000 metric tons. It dropped again in 2018-2019 crop season to 812 metric tons, then climbs back 2019-2020 to 850 metric tons. Now, one of the key things we need to analyze here, remember that NDC says they want to bring back free fertilizer. Their argument is that free fertilizer must have a link to increased productivity for the farmers because it's free. Exactly. They can use it to apply, kill the diseases, etc. But does it necessarily correlate that if you do free, then necessarily we're going to have increased production of cocoa? As we've seen, it's not necessarily true.
Exactly.
Because the 2013 to 2016, the lowest we've had actually is 740,000 metric tons. That's the time we're still doing free fertilizer.
Yeah. So, there are dimensions, the rainy season
and all that,
and all of that, and the practices. But currently, there's a productivity enhancement program. There was a support from the African Development Bank that gave some fund. But I want to see the 2020, 2021. What's the difference? Yeah. Because if we have started some of these things, the pruning and all of it, and we are not getting the result, then we have to start questioning as early as possible before we have to cast our minds.
In terms of track record, though, it appears that the John Mahama 2016-2017, as the graph looks like, tells you that they did the best in terms of the production.
Yeah, over here, I think there was one in 2011.
Yes, 2011, that's 1 million tons. But that is John Mills. That is John Mills. So I have the record. That was a record production. 1 million metric tons of cocoa produced. That's John Mills. But in terms of John Mahama, this is his best.
Exactly.
It beats Nanado's best, by the way. We'll try and interrogate that in terms of track record. Let's quickly wrap up and bring our guests in. Now, the other cash crops are obviously there. The NDC is promising establish a cashew development board to coordinate cashew-related issues. Now, this, for me, is interesting. The MPP did promise this in 2016, but they implemented something different when they got into government. This is it. The Tree Crop Development Authority. That, for me, it doesn't rub off as sincere. It doesn't, because you promise cashew board, and then
sometimes the reality don't.
Exactly.
You have to adjust.
But these are where questions must be asked.
Yes, and they are really promising some huge gains in this area. I want to start looking deep into these things because we may have to, we may promise huge gains that we may think we will have, but we will not have. So at the early stage, we have to start thinking about that with regards to the board, the tree crop authority. I mean.
Another question for the NDC is, and this is paying attention to what is already there, is that tree crop development really is about
cashew,
with the exception of cocoa,
exactly.
Right? But so if you're doing cashew board, which is subsumed already under tree crop, duplication.
What's the issue? That's the issue.
Possible duplication.
So would they change it now? We should ask them, would they change it now or they will still maintain?
Yeah.
We should go to engage.
Or would they scrap this? What would they do with this particular one that is already in existence?
Exactly.
I mean, that's a key point to also interrogate. I mean, fishing is another area that, if you look at the trend in terms of fishing, I think it's in the negative growth.
Yes. There were some times that it went to the negative. But in first quarter of this year, this logging that has a lot of decline around that
area. And then NDC has a lot of input there in terms of what they're proposing to do: streamline fisheries policies and incentivize fishermen, increase productivity, establish modern fish stores. MPP is completely silent on fishing, which for me is quite interesting.
I don't think incumbency should mean you shouldn't tell us what you do in this area. Because when you tell us that will feed into the national strategic plan and want to see it.
But they'll have a fisheries ministry if they win.
Exactly.
But you have no policy proposal for 2021-20. So what is the fisheries ministry going to implement? I mean, for me, it's key. But this is going to be your guiding document going forward. But you have absolutely nothing on fishing. Meanwhile, it's a key part of the agric sector. Let's quickly look at livestock. And remember that they have the MPP has the planting, rearing for food and jobs, right? But what they promise here is to enhancement of small ruminant production with supply of improved breeds of sheep and goats. Yes. How are they going to do that? Improved breeds?
That's the
What's
issue.
that?
So they have to tell us who are they supporting, how are they targeting them, and all of those.
Poultry is important. NDC is targeting work with the Poultry Farmers Association to increase capacity to meet domestic market demands and for export.
Yeah. So what the NDC tend to do is to use a number of about 8 kind of institutions that they put under the Agric that would do some of these things, poultry, fishing, and all of that. And they enlisted it in their manifesto. And then over here, they indicated they will be working with the Poultry Farmers Association. But we have to be asking, government has been working with all of these people. What is the new area that you will be doing? Where will you be pushing the differences? And
the challenges of the poultry farmers, some that they can't even find a feed.
Exactly.
Also competition with imported poultry products. The big policy intervention they've always asked is to ban the importation of poultry, so you give preference to the local market. Yeah. Most governments, including the NDC, have not had the courage to do it, and no wonder they've dodged those two issues completely. But they are work with the poultry farmers to increase capacity to meet domestic market. But how do you increase the capacity if you don't
even the exports, as they are indicating?
Exactly, an export. If you don't protect your own market. Carl, thank you very much,
so much
for that great analysis. We're going to take a break. When we return, the Deputy Agric Minister is my guest. Also joining me is the NDC Manifesto spokesperson on Agric. You've already set the ball and the basis for the conversation. Some interrogation and probe of the manifestos on the areas we've looked at so far after the break. Stay with me. And thank you very much for staying with us here on PM Express. It is, of course, another conversation about the manifestos of the two main political parties. And I'm delighted to say that I've been joined in the studio by Mr. Kennedy Nyakose, who is the Deputy Agric Minister. He's also a Member of Parliament for Akim Stradro constituency, and has agreed to leave the field. As you know, this is a time when they campaign a lot in his constituency to join us. well, so he can sell his manifesto. I mean, so thank you for making time. So how is the campaign going?
Well, everything is fine. Everything is going well.
Okay. Well, I mean, December 7 will tell her, will give us the ultimate answer. Michael Harry Yamsing is the NDC Manifesto spokesperson on Agric. I'm assuming that you've also been on the trail, the campaign trail, helping your party. I mean, this is part of an extension of that campaign, by the way.
Definitely.
Because of the millions who watch every Wednesday when we talk about the manifesto.
Yeah.
Let's go straight to it. I want to start with the big picture. Agric growth rate, the growth rate, and what both parties, what you've done in terms of that. Mr. Yams, I want to start with you because I look at the Ghana Statistical Service, document that tracks the growth rate over the period. If we look at the last, because the beauty of this year's elections, both parties have two leaders who have all been in government recently, right? John Mahama has been in government 4 years, Nana-Addo 4 years as well. So both of them are going into a contest. All of them are, they've been in government. And so track record is critical in assessing 2021, 2024. And so, Mr. Yamson, my question then on the back of that is, if you look at the Agric sector growth rate for your period, let's look at the Statistical Services analysis on 2024, for example, which is the data that I have, to 2016 when John Mahama was there before he left. You were as low as 0.9%.
Yes.
You climbed to 2.3%. And then you climbed to 2.9%. In 2017, when Nana-Addo came in, 6.1%.
Yes.
2018, 4.8%. 2019, 4.6%. You were playing in the 2%. They were in the 6 and 4%. In track record terms, they seem to be a more trusted hand in the Agric sector than you are.
Well, that's a fair analysis. But one of the things that I will say, I think King said it when you were speaking to him, is that in agriculture, in a factor-driven agricultural economy such as we have, the growth that you see today is quite often the work that has been done 2 years and 3 years prior. Cocoa trees are dependent on rain-fed agriculture. So the sort of work that we would have done with free fertilizer, extension services, the hybrid seed program, and the rest of it, all do add up at the end of the day to the outcome that you see years down the line. I dare say that in the time of Prof, you have recorded that we achieved 1 million tons of cocoa. But that sort of level of performance did not really taper off. It was sustained. And that has to do quite significantly with the quality of the policy that was in place and how well it was also implemented. I think that we have seen some changes to policy, and maybe that would be a basis for us to have a conversation. But I would clearly say that there is something that was inherited by the NDC administration.
So you're saying that the 2016
and
6.1 growth rate was due to your intervention?
So I would say significantly, because there are things that were in place that have continued. I've noted in the manifesto conversation references to GESL. GESL is a facility that was given birth by the NDC government, the last NDC government. I've seen references to Rearing for Food and Jobs. The ruminant program.
Is that your baby?
Well, it began under the NDC program. I've seen references to Planting for Food and Jobs. It began with a Canadian facility in the NDC administration.
So you're saying that the NPP reaped from the work the seeds you sowed?
Yes, and I will say this. We do say that government is a continuum. So I'm not shy or in any way disappointed if the agricultural sector has benefited from the foresight of the last NDC administration. And I will say that kudos to my colleague for the growth that has been recorded, for the contributions that have been recorded. But I think embedded in that, you will also see that some of the growth outturns have not been as strong as we would have anticipated if the focus was.
I am surprised you say that, because their growth compared to yours, is far stronger.
That's fine.
Okay, well, Minister, so here you go. He says part of the successes that I've just pointed out, because you're reaping from what they've sowed.
Even says, first of all, let me just say a very good evening to your cherished viewers, and use this opportunity to also say a good evening to my constituents who are currently watching me. And I believe the statistics are there. I don't need to debate or belabor upon what is already contained in the report. I mean, everything is clear. They had 8 years in government, and what they could do is what they did. 4 years in government, and we've been able to do what they couldn't do within 8 years. You have given the statistics out from 2014, how their performance have been in terms of growth in agric sector. We have also shown you what we have been able to do, and I believe it is the interventions that the Akufo-Addo government have introduced that is what has led to this growth, and we anticipate that it continues, and there's no two ways about it. I am of the firm belief that it is as a result of some conscious effort and policies that have been put in place by the Akufo-Addo government that has led to such growth, and one of it is the Planting for Food and Job. You know, this is a flagship program that was introduced by the Akufo-Addo government. I was surprised when my colleague said that it was started by the NDC.
But you mentioned specifically it was a grant.
Well, I mean,
True or false?
I don't want to go about it. Yes, there was a Canadian grant with MAG.
That the NDC.
It has nothing to do with Planting for Food and Job. Planting for Food and Job is being sponsored by government of Ghana 100%. It's government of Ghana which is financing this. It's not coming from MAG. Is just different from what he's talking about. MAG, the Canadian government made that available 110 million Canadian dollars for 5-year program to modernize agriculture in Ghana. During their time, you know why they couldn't access the fund? Because the kind of expenditure outlay that is submitted to the Canadian government, it was something that the Canadian government did not agree to it, because the expenditure pattern they wanted to use to, we saw it, we have reviewed the document, they wanted to buy a lot of vehicles, use, I mean, a huge chunk of the 100, which is equivalent about 520 million Ghana cedi, which was going to be spread for 5 years, use a major chunk of it to buy fleet of vehicles, and these vehicles are not even pickups. These are 4x4 vehicles that they wanted to buy for let's say the Agric officers and all those. So we came and said, why? We believe that we can better use this money in other areas. There are several Agric officers across the country that are not mobile. We can buy pickups for them. The regional Agric officers, we can buy them some pickups too as well. We can buy motorbike, because the extension officers across the country, they didn't have any means of transport, and they were just sitting at the office. They have no means. They can't. So we came in and said, okay, this is our proposal. We want to use the money to buy at least about 3,000 pieces of motorbikes for Agric extension officers.
And you did that?
We did that.
Okay,
we procured 3,000.
Yeah, but you have to credit them for securing the funding for you.
Well, I will not say that. They didn't do well. I mean, it was a facility that the Canadian government then have made it. It happens to every government. It's the most important thing is how they were going to use the money, which they could not submit a proper, means of how to use the money.
But facts are important. They secured it for you.
So
you use the money that they secured.
Well, I mean,
it's a government, I understand. But
it's a government, it's a continuous government. And it was the Canadian government who wanted to help the agric sector, the Ghana government to.
So you mustn't admit that that helped the planting for food and jobs.
No, it has nothing to. That's
but these agriculture officers who were driving the motorbike,
we have procured,
you use for the implementation.
The chunk, about let's say 99% of the funds that we are using to run the planting for food and job is from the GOG budget. Okay, we are talking about subsidized fertilizer, which is coming from the payment is coming from government coffers. We've bought almost about 920,000 metric tons since 2017. Government of Ghana is paying for it.
Metric tons of
fertilizer. Yes, we've bought almost about 18,000. Yes, we are subsidizing it for. Okay. I mean, we have subsidized. This is a food. We are talking about the food crop fertilizer, like the MPK, and we are not talking about the cocoa one. We are talking about the food crop fertilizer, and we have. The same time too, we are spending huge money in buying improved seeds. Almost about 18,000 metric tons of improved seeds have been supplied.
And what is the impact of this on the agri sector?
It's there, you see. So when you take the statistics, I mean, you've seen the performance of the NDC from 2014. And when you get to 2017 going, I mean, it tells you clearly that there have been some kind of changes. I mean, even if you look at I have a data. I don't know whether I mean, maybe if they can project it.
This is what planting for food and jobs.
Well, this under planting for food and jobs. So you compare what we are doing under planting for food and jobs with that planting for food and jobs in terms of cereal, in terms of soybean, in terms of rice is there. We have been able to, in terms of even
let's see that table. Planting for food and jobs.
In terms of maize production, we have been able to increase.
So this is what you're referring to.
Yes.
What's the point of this, though?
So it is there. You see the total milled rice. I mean, before we came into office, 2016 milled rice, they were doing just 474,000 metric tons. Okay, in terms of milled rice, I'm not talking about the paddy rice. In terms of the paddy rice, they were doing about 660,000 metric tons of paddy rice. These are the milled rice, because after you milled it, certainly you're going to lose some form of the rice. And we have moved it. If you look at 2017, we did a little about it. 2018, we moved to 530. 2019, we've moved to
metric tons.
Yes, these are metric tons. And if you are to compare this to our annual consumption rate, okay, we are doing almost about 1.32 million metric tons of rice as annual consumption rate. Okay?
This is locally produced rice.
Locally produced. So we are doing, as I speak, we are doing almost about 50% of our annual consumption.
Okay? Locally. So what you're saying is that right now we are producing about 50% of the rice that we consume
locally. Okay, and our target is by 2023 we should be able to meet, I mean, our demand, what is about 1.6 million metric tons, which we are not going to. That's why we've given a target for ourselves that by 2023, we are going to ensure that importation of rice into this country, either it is scrap or even minimized by about 90%. We can, if you want to import, it shouldn't be more than 10%.
So you're going to, so the long-term policy, but why is it not on your manifesto?
Okay. What in terms of the right? I mean, that is why we said our manifesto is just a continuity. We are consolidating the gains.
But I find it curious that you've just announced a very big policy proposal going into 2023, which is that eventually you either scrapping importation of rice or imposing restrictions to limit it to bare minimum. And yet, in your biggest policy document that will guide you for the next 4 years, you are completely silent.
Let me say something about that. I need to say something about the rice.
Okay,
I need to say something about that. Those numbers on rice that you saw don't tell you a certain story.
Okay.
We had a base of cultivated land under rice production. And then we added on to that stock of land over the term that he's talking about. When you do the analysis, what you see is that the productivity gains actually mean that, the story on the productivity gains actually mean that where Ghana has its current base for rice production, the Volta region and the Northern Enclave, actually suffered a decline in the yield per acre during this period.
This is 2017 to, to now.
Exactly. So what you'll see when you analyze the numbers, the yield on the additional land that was added, is that you will see very clearly Volta region recorded about 25% increase in yield. The Upper East recorded -9, Upper West only 9, Northern region 16. These are the hotspots for rice production, and they recorded the lowest increases in productivity.
So you say that's because?
So that is because the policy itself, and I won't fault it, the policy itself of expanding rice production is good. But you cannot do that and take your eye off the most important areas. And those numbers, when you analyze them, and I didn't know we'll be talking about those numbers, otherwise I'd have shown you the graph that we've looked at. It's something that I think we need to be very careful about. The policies are good, and like I said when we started, government is a continuum. Good ideas will be carried over from one government to another.
So you're endorsing your policy?
I am not in any way saying that investing in rice production is wrong. But
you agree with your numbers?
But investing, and I don't dispute the totals. What I'm saying is that when you deliver the totals, but you at the same time deliver the worst increases, the lowest increases in your hotspots for rice production, that means you may well achieve 90% of rice production locally, but you would have impoverished the areas that have that currently are your hotspots.
But why is that important, by the way? Because aren't you taking a national view of this? That is
important because
than hotspot view.
Wait, it's not about hotspot view per se, but that is important because you need to carry all the farmers along. When you look at planting for food and jobs, and I want to disown it because it has some roots in the thinking of the NDC. When you look at planting for food and jobs, one of the things you will discover in there is that the medium-sized and large-scale farmers who will be the future of agriculture are not covered. Most of the beneficiaries are smallholder farmers with 1 acre, 2 acre farms. Now that is fine for maintaining subsistence agriculture, but that's not the future. So planting for food and jobs has, if you like, a date stamp. And like you said, there's nothing...
So it will run itself out.
It will run itself out, because if you want to do industrialization, as we've talked about, and has been touted in the 1D, 1F, where is the medium scale and large scale agriculture? And that's what our manifesto then seeks to address by saying that we want to invest in developing more of the medium scale and large scale farms. That will be the future if we want to have industrialization in our agricultural sector. I don't for 1 minute say that let's not do something that will benefit our farmers, but we must do it in such a way that we don't take our eye off those who have held up the industry. You talked about our manifesto being an Agric and a cocoa manifesto. I dare say it's fair to do that because cocoa has sustained this economy.
In fact, I'll come to cocoa because it's such a big area shortly. So I'll come to that.
Rest.
But back to the point that you're making about this rice thing.
Yes.
And I was asking the question, the big policy, long-term policy. Why is it not in your manifesto?
Well, it's there. I mean, maybe you don't see it in specific, but as part of...
It's not there.
I mean,
I've read your manifesto.
Well, maybe I can open you. You say promotion of input substitution with special focus on rice and sugar and poultry. So they've mentioned specifically rice. Yeah, already we have a national program of rice production, which is
the policy that says we are either scrapping, and you put the date to it by 2023.
This is a program which is already ongoing. So I don't see why we should bring it back, state it. It's an ongoing project that the ministry has already started. I mean, it will end in 2023. We have made a lot of gains already in terms of rice production. It's a national program that we are doing. That's why my brother said that it seems we have neglected some, areas that are known when it comes to rice production. No, but we want to make it a national agenda.
But here's a question for you. I mean, this is not based on, I like to be factual and refer to data, but this is not based on any data. It's just based on what I experienced as a Ghanaian. You said, Karen, we are producing 50% of all rice we produce locally.
Yes.
Rice is my favorite meal.
Yes.
Why can't I find a local rice then to buy?
There are local rice all over. Maybe
where?
Because they are low. I mean, I don't want
to... You said 50%?
Yes, what we are producing now, because we are doing...
Which market? I go to the market, I buy rice a lot. Where I can find...
You can't find any brand of the...
No!
Maybe you have...
Mention one popular Ghanaian brand.
We have Champion.
Just give me one.
No, we know Champion is made by... it's a Ghanaian locally.
You're strong.
No, it's a locally produced. I'm saying Champion is a locally.
I can list 10 foreign brands and tell you where they're coming from. Off my tongue.
No, Champion is locally produced.
But you couldn't tell me who is producing it.
You see, I don't want to come and advertise for.
But why? If it's a locally produced rice,
there are a lot of locally produced.
But my question remains: I can't find it. If 50%,
you want me to bring you? I would have. If I, I would have.
I find it hard to believe that we have 50%.
Even yesterday, there was a new brand that is called Mama Rice, Jasmine. I don't want to mention the company name. That we have done at my ministry. Yes.
50%?
Yes.
Of the rice we consume, it's produced locally.
During the lockdown, when it was difficult for anybody to import anything into this country, we were consuming what we were producing in this country. It was the local rice that we were consuming. So you ask yourself, all this while that COVID is around, people are consuming rice. Maybe you have not made any conscious effort to go and live. You are used to the foreign taste, so you go and whatever you get on the market, you want to take it. But there are a lot of brands. Yeah, baby rice. I mean, there are a lot of. I don't want to.
And all because of your intervention, you say.
Yes, we have invested heavily into the rice sector. We want to ensure, because at the moment we are spending not less than 1.2 billion in importing rice into this country, which is a huge money.
We want to keep the money here.
We want to keep the money here.
Brief comment on that. I find it, as I said, I mean, this is not based on any scientific data, but 50% of all that we consume locally, rice is produced locally. You accept that as a fact?
I would say that if there's something to be said, it is that we have not promoted our rice sector well enough. In the last administration, there was a major investment in rice by a company called Agric around Sogakope. And I would say that that program actually came with a very concerted effort to build a brand. What we've seen subsequently is a failure to do the work to market the rice that we produce, the quality of value addition of our value-added rice. We've produced rice, as the Deputy Minister says, to meet half of our requirements. But I dare say that if you want it, you cannot find it. And it's one thing to have the product, it's another thing to find it. And so I think the failure that we need to, or I wouldn't even call it failure, but I'll say that the work that we need to focus minds on is the marketing of our local produce.
Yeah, I didn't see much of that in either manifesto.
Well, no, it's there in the NDC manifesto. You see, we talk about the fact that you are going up against Ghanaian agricultural produce is going up against high value added imported products. So we have set ourselves a target, and maybe it's not a 4-year deliverable, but it's certainly a reasonable target to say that at least we must make sure that 40% of what we produce in Ghana is market ready to international standards. It's the only way that you're going to convince your wife.
Produce.
Yes, it's the only way I'm going to convince you and your wife and your friends
to
actually look for the Ghanaian produce. You know, even under Planting for Food and Jobs, we've talked a lot about rice, but there's also maize. And what has happened with maize? Even though we are planting more maize, we are also importing more maize. And it's not me saying it, it's the U.S. Department of Agriculture's data that we're importing more maize. Now, I would never say that Ghana should close off its economy. But what we produce, we should add more value to. And that should be the focus of our agriculture going forward. Up to today, it's all about let us produce. But that doesn't serve our interests. It's only when we make the focus add value addition that we will actually begin to benefit from agriculture.
Brief point.
So you will see in the manifesto that it's no longer about agriculture. It's about agriculture and agribusiness. That is so fundamental.
I must say, I see that running through.
For me, that is a paradigm shift for us in agriculture, because rearing for food and jobs, planting for food and jobs, cocoa, it's all about producing for someone else to add value. Now we're shifting gear. Okay. And I think it's very important.
So that's the NDC approach.
That is the NDC approach.
You see, Evans, the MPP as a government decided to tackle the entire industry holistically. We were not just playing lip service to some specific areas like the NDC did. Okay, so when we are talking about the crop or the food crop aspect, we know the kind of policies that we are putting in place to ensure that we're able to produce enough to ensure food security. When it comes to maybe livestock, we have a specific policy which is there. When it comes to horticulture, there's a specific policy there. When it comes to tree crop, there is a specific policy there. So when it comes to agric mechanization, there's a specific
and where's the value addition part to this?
Well,
is a question.
You see, that is why in broad term, the NPP says that, okay, there's going to be one district, one factory. The agric sector is going to produce for the factories to process
we haven't seen that
add value. I mean, if you look at all the companies under the 1D, 1F, almost about 70% of those that are functioning now, or even those that have applied in the process of coming into mainstream, agri-processing companies. That was the idea, that how do we add value to our raw materials, the agri-produce. So if you want to do one district, one factory, then the focus or the greater focus of the 1D, 1F should be agri-processing. So that has been the idea. So if you see Akumfi and other 1D, 1F factories that are using our locally produced raw materials or agri-produce to as a raw material to produce their produce, I mean, it should tell you that the focus is not just producing the raw materials and just leaving them there, but to also feed the factory that we are talking about. So sometimes I find it difficult when our brothers from the other side poo-poo or criticize our 1D, 1F, trying to see it as something that is not feasible.
I would never.
I want to
maybe he would. No, brother would never. But I have seen that.
Yeah, I want to take a break. We talk a lot about food crops. When we return from the break, we talk about cash crops now. Talk about cash crops. Talk about cashew. We talk about cocoa. And cocoa has a lot of controversy there that we need to interrogate, right? I mean, the NDC, as you heard the money analysis say, they seem to have a manifesto, a cocoa manifesto, when it comes to the agric sector. We interrogate that. We interrogate both parties' records on the cocoa sector. Recently, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo announced a 660 cedi per bag of cocoa, which is the highest price you're paying to the farmer since. What does it compare to the previous years? But then we'll also look at production and what the policy says after we return from this. Stay with me. Thanks for staying with me. This is PM Express Manifesto Tracker. In the studio with me, if you may have missed it, but we did a 30-minute analysis of the two parties' manifestos on the Agric sector. Now we are interrogating it with the two reps, the Kennedy Nyako-Osei, who is a Deputy Agriculture Minister. He's also the MP for Akim Sredru constituency. Also with me today is the NDC Manifesto spokesperson on Agric. He is Michael Harry Yamson. Thank you, gentlemen, for staying with me. Let's come to the cash crops. We talk a lot about the food crops. Let's talk about the cash crops. Let's start with cashew. I mean, in 2016, when you were seeking power, the MPP, you promised to set up the Cashew Marketing Authority.
Yeah.
And then you come into government, and then you abandon that idea and rather go into establishing the Ghana Tree Crops Development Authority. That's not what you promised.
Well, that is not what we promised, but after assumption, taking office, we realized that though cashew has become a matured crop, but there were others that we believe that also they are equally matured, has a lot of potential of raking in a lot of money into this country. So we said, okay, if we have other crops that we can also depend on, that are mature, that we can develop and put proper regulatory regime in the sector or in the system to make sure that we're able to rake in a lot of money, why don't you establish an omnibus authority to regulate? Because we are talking about tree crop, and all of this, whether cashew, whether coconut, whether shea, whether rubber, whether oil palm, whether mango, they are all tree crop. So you cannot just establish. The moment it happens that we establish the cashew board, it means the other crops will also demand that we should establish. Boss,
but you have to look at it based on your contribution to the economy.
Yes.
Cashew, according to your ministry,
yes,
in 2018 brought in $370 million.
Yes. And look at oil palm. How much?
You tell me.
Oil palm is making almost about $250 million to this country. We are exporting a lot of oil palm from this country outside. Okay, and we believe that it's not only oil palm, rubber. All rubber, the ones that we process, we export rubber. Nobody uses the final rubber product here. We export it. Okay, so we have a huge investment that we have done in the Western region. Thanks to former President Kufuor, who brought that kind of investment, and we have this rubber agro-west scheme in the Western region. There's a huge rubber plantation that we have invested. The country have spent a lot of money in. So you want us to just leave it just like that to hang on its own? So we said no. Okay, let us go and study other developed countries, those who have done it. So we went to Ivory Coast. We realized that Ivory Coast, like Ghana, also have rubber, have oil palm, have cashew. How have they been able to manage the sector, the subsector? Okay, so they have established something called FICA. Okay, where they have brought a lot of all this tree crop under one umbrella. And this authority or whatever FICA is fetching the government or the sector not less than $100 million just as taxes or whatever revenues that they get to develop the tree crop. Okay, so we say, okay, if we can, Ivory Coast can generate a lot of money to just self-develop the sector, why don't you also study the model, go to Malaysia to study how they are doing it? But
this is what I find fascinating.
Okay.
As late as 2008.
Yeah, 2018. I know.
2018.
Yeah.
The president was still touring the country.
Yes.
And promising to set the cashew board. So what happened in the last 1 year?
No, Wes, like I said, yes, it was true. Even if you look at our manifesto, we made a
so when did you change your mind?
It's not like we have changed our mind, okay?
In 2018, you were promising cashew board.
So you look at the and
then all of a sudden,
you look at the dynamics on the ground. We were in the process of going ahead with the cashew board. Then the other sectors also started trooping in, bringing their requests that we also want you to establish the oil palm board, give us the rubber board. We said no, we cannot establish several boards just like that. The focus should be one. what we want to do in the tree crop sector or the perennial crop sector. So what do you do? So okay, why don't we have the best approach? And the best approach is already we have an example.
You agree this is your proposal in your manifesto was to do the cashew board, which is their original
but
position.
even before you go to him, okay, the reason why we decided to go for this tree crop, have the omnibus tree crop authority. We did a feasibility studies, okay, on all these 6 crops that we've selected, and we realized that if we are able to develop this crop within the next 5 years, this crop will give this country a minimum of $12 billion in addition to what we are getting
annually.
2.5 annually from what we are getting from the 2.5 billion we are getting from cocoa. So if this crop can give us that huge money, how much were we going to look for? I mean, sometimes we go out to look for as low as maybe $200 million, and you have
let me Mr. Your approach is different. You want to focus exclusively on cashew and do the cashew board.
I think that these things are progressions. If you talk about tree crop and the lessons from Cote d'Ivoire, I will not fault those lessons. But I think the issue really is about what Ghana's focus ought to be. We have a cashew sector that has enormous potential. I sat in meetings with the oil palm industry asking for a board, an authority to look after their issues. And I think there is some wisdom in the request of the operators, those who work in the industry, saying that they need focus. We have cocoa board. It's been in existence for forever, and it has been able to pay particular attention. Part of the value, the premium that we are getting from cocoa today, it's also because of the focused attention that we have paid to that sector. It's not a fluke. So when these other tree crop sectors ask government that in their considered view, what is required is focus and specific boards to look after their interests and to pay attention to their needs for value addition and attracting international market opportunity, bringing in FDI, and oh, by the way, domestic investment as well. There is some value in paying attention to that. Lumping everything together at this point in time with the disparate needs and requests, my fear is that it's good intention, but it may not deliver the results that we're looking for.
Because the alternative is to have a palm board.
Hold on. Because now the players have to get into that board and duke it out for primacy, because that
it's going to be a struggle.
And it's going to be a struggle
between those producing the palm oil.
And who loses at the
nuts.
end is the same tree crop sector that will lose. It's the same farmer in rural Ghana who will lose. So the sectors are saying, the subsectors are saying, give us focus. And I think there is value in that. And we have listened to that request.
But you've only listened to cashew.
We've only listened to cashew because these are, for the sake of a better expression, these are not our traditional food crop exports. So you're going to have to do one and do it well and expand very quickly.
But if the figure he puts out is 200 million for palm
my question is over what
period? Aren't you missing out?
My question is over what period? Because palm already has a very sophisticated supply chain here in Ghana. Palm oil, without an authority, has a very sophisticated value chain. Cashew, on the other hand, as the Deputy Minister said, has been corralled by parties non-Ghanaian, parties that don't really work in that sector to the benefit of Ghana. So we have to ask ourselves the question, is it in the oil palm sector where the companies are largely responsible and are building up the Ghanaian farmer and building up the capacity and investing in technology and agronomy? Or should we focus on cashew that has nothing? So I would say that I won't throw away the request of any other food crops, tree crop sector, but I will certainly not lump them all together into one authority and force very, very capable sectors, very endowed sectors like oil palm to go up against mango. It's a no-brainer. Oil palm will get preference because mango is nothing close to oil palm. So I'm not going to put the interest of mango in the same box as I put the interest of oil palm.
Let's talk about our biggest earner in Agric, by far, cocoa. Honorable, so Agric, NDC seem to have shown in terms of some of the indicators. We look up the production, right? They hold the record of 1 million. Let's look at John Mahama because he's on the ballot in December. 2016, 2017, they managed to, the production was, as the statistics show, 969,000 metric tons. Your highest you've done was 2017, 2018 at 905,000 metric tons. And that was right after you did you scrapped the free fertilizer and replaced it with subsidies, subsidization of fertilizers. Isn't that clearly telling you that policy-wise, your intervention and what they're proposing now to do, focusing quite heavily on the cocoa sector, is the way to go?
Well, I don't think so. If you look at cocoa production and from 2009 downwards, at the point where the country recorded our first 1 million metric tons, cocoa production, annual production keeps declining.
It did.
In 2016, 2017, the NDC projected to purchase 900,000 metric tons of cocoa.
They ended up purchasing, what, 969,000?
And they, you see, so that is why, they lost power, okay? So they were not in government. 2017, we came
So you took credit.
So we took over. By the time we came in office, the NDC have purchased 690,000 from the major crop season. Okay, there are 2 seasons there. 90,000. Okay, they have gone for a syndicated loan of 1.8 billion. They have purchased 690,000 metric tons of cocoa. It means they've paid for it for the major season. The light season, they have not made any provision. Okay, they have not paid a penny. And the light season, we are talking about almost about 23 to 20% production. Okay, so if our annual production is, let's say 100,000, 23% is the light season, and NDC only paid for the major season, which is about 690,000 metric tons. So we came in, we realized that there was no money. We have not been able to meet the annual production that they set in. We have to look for money. Cocoa Board has to go to Bank of Ghana to go for loan, to come and buy that 23% the light season crop and add it to it. That is how come we're able to. So if you want to assess the actual performance of NDC in 2016, 2017 cocoa season, they only purchased 690,000 metric tons at the end of December when they were leaving office. So we have to come and buy all the light crop. We bought it. They never left a penny. Okay? They have spent $1.4 billion to purchase the 690,000 metric tons. There was a balance of $400 million that we knew it was sitting in the account. By the time, in all calculation, we thought we were coming to use that money to buy the light crop. When we came, that money had been used. So we have to quickly, Cocoa Bar to go to Bank of Ghana to go and borrow almost about 200 million Ghana cedi to buy the light crop. That is how come we're able to meet the 916,000. So you cannot give credit to the NDC that they were able to achieve 916,000. If you want the real achievement, it's not true.
I'm only wondering whether the beans were there to be bought.
So the light crop, the beans were there, so you have not paid for it.
But you're good.
You have not paid for it.
don't agree
You
with
have not paid for it. So how do you do
What's the story?
it?
What's your story?
I don't have a story to tell. I don't have a story.
But because the facts show that the highest production in the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Eight crop seasons.
Yes.
8 crop season was in that period.
All that I'm saying is that the beans were there to be bought. Because that is the production that we are talking about, is it not?
And this is your term, you're taking credit
No,
for
he's talking about 960 metric tons. And I'm saying, and he's making a case that 690 of it was bought and paid for, and then they came into office and bought the rest. My point is, the beans were there to be bought. If the beans were not there to be bought, it wouldn't count as production. If there were no beans, there would be no, then you wouldn't record 960.
So your point is the beans were there to be bought because of your policy interventions that made it available?
Well, of the management.
Of the management.
Put it this way, it is all about management. And look, let's me raise a point. At the end of the day, what we're looking for is a well-run cocoa sector that is able to give us the kinds of yields that allow us to have some stability when we are talking about planning for our own development, because cocoa is so critical. Like I've said, this is a tree crop, government is a continuum. We have to plan over the long term. What you have seen under the NDC government, and I'll boil it down to one number, the cost the cost of production, the contribution of management in the cost of production. Throughout the tenure of the NDC, this number sat well around the 15% mark, never crossed 20. In the last few years, we've seen the management cost of the cocoa sector touch 22, touch 28, and recently with only part of the figures, so I won't talk about it. But we've seen it touch 22 and 28%. We cannot, and you have made the point earlier, that it is the farmer's money at the end of the day. In any sector, the amount that you spend versus the value that you give, you really need to keep the amount that you spend under control.
So you talk about the farmers.
I'm talking about the farmers because the more we spend managing the sector, the less we have.
They get it, but
the less that we have to spend on the farmers.
But here's the thing about the farmers. Your manifesto, as the analysis indicated, is heavy on that.
Yes,
because you think that you want to improve the farmer's lot.
And that's the point that I'm making.
But the farmer, the fundamental indicator is how much you're paying him for the cocoa, right?
The fundamental indicator is how much you're paying him for the cocoa. And
but on that, the MPP holds a record over you in terms of how they've fared, how they've done in terms of paying the cocoa. I mean, the evidence shows in 2013, John Mahama, you were paying 212 cedis per 64 kg bag, right? In 2016, when John Mahama was exiting, you were paying 475 cedis per kg bag, per 64 kg bag.
And the interval.
So that's like 200. That's like 200 cedis, increase. In 2017, when Nanado came in, they met 475 cedis per 64 kg bag. Currently, it is 660. That is what? That is
of which there is a one of living
income differential.
Whatever it's going into the pocket of the farmer.
One of the achievements.
Hold on.
So 1 minute to address that. 1 minute to address that.
So you have a one of living income differential. Fair point. It is a policy of the government. My question always on these things is about sustainability, number one, because this is a one-off.
You think it's not sustainable?
Wow, it is a one-off. So
it's not a one-off.
I'll come to you. I mean, to wrap up.
So we have now come into partnership with Côte d'Ivoire, and therefore that will help us. And kudos for that. But this is still a one-off, and the issue about sustainability has not been answered. The other bit that we have to ask ourselves, strike that out and ask yourself, what is the real increase that was on the table? It's about 3%. Strike off the one-off living income differential, and the real change is just about 3%.
But it's about what is in my pocket at the end of the day, right?
At the end of the day, but it is a one-off. Okay. So all that I'm saying is that let's worry too much about one-off gifts from the supply chain partners. Let's focus on what it is that we can do. We are talking about value addition to cocoa in Ghana. We are talking about value addition to cashew in Ghana. We're talking about building sustainability on our own terms.
Okay, let me give you a minute.
We are not for 1 minute going to surrender the sustainability of Ghana's cocoa sector to the love of supply chain partners. That can never be.
Well, Evans, he made mention of the living income differential. I think he has to, something that the NDC have to give credit to the Akufo-Addo government. I mean, since we came to office, we have put in place 12 solid interventions on the cocoa sector. I was just looking up to you to ask what kind of intervention the NDC in 8 years under the cocoa sector.
Fertilizer.
Is it the only intervention that they did?
Impact.
Is the only free fertilizer that can change under the NDC? Okay, in 2014, when there have been a report that Kodapec have produced a report.
We have a minute to
sum this up. So that's almost about 315,000 hectares of our farmland, cocoa land, have been affected by cocoa swollen shoot virus disease. Okay, so nothing was done about it. As we speak now, Cocoa Board have lost almost about 40% of the cocoa farmland that we have in this country, either through CSSVD or overage. He is talking about value addition. By the time they left office in 2017, Cocoa Board was able to, Ghana was able to process just 23%. As I speak, we are processing 40% of our cocoa bean in this country.
According to?
It's the records are there. If you look at Cocoa Board...
Is it according to the Agric Ministry of Statistical Services?
You can find out from Ministry of Agric. This is official source that you can get the document. You can get it from Cocoa Board.
Because we still give different numbers to Parliament.
Wanko at that time was total in collapse. Wanko has collapsed. Okay, CPC was collapsed. We have to come and revive it, invest a lot of money in it. Niche was virtually not doing anything. Plot Enterprise was not doing anything. These 4 companies have been revived. They were not even getting beans to process. Cocoa under the NDC, these companies were importing cocoa beans into this country to process from neighboring countries.
So have they stopped?
Well,
have they stopped?
They haven't.
Okay,
but they have
sustainability.
Reduced. They haven't,
but they have reduced. Okay,
reduce it.
But Honorable, I'm grateful that you joined me. Mr. Yamsing, thank you also for joining me. I hope you've heard enough to decide where to pitch your tent. If you are Agric, if Agric is what will convince you, I hope they've done enough to help you decide. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.